Do we need to include culture in education? To answer to this question, we have to have the concepts clear with a broad understanding in order to understand their need in education. Culture is a concept with quite a few branches that make it up. These concepts depend on the state, region, or nation in which they are located. This makes a place identified with customs. The function of culture is that a form of adaptation is found. Cognitive elements refers to the knowledge accumulated within a certain culture for survival versus nature and adaptation within the social group. Belief. It encompasses the set of ideas that a culture group establishes about what is true or false. It is linked to the value system. Values. They are the criteria that serve as models evaluating behavior, since they guide those that are considered acceptable or unacceptable. Principles and attitudes to guarantee the continuity of the group. Standards. There are specific codes of action that regulate the relationship between individuals based on shared values. It includes the sanction system. There are two types of rules. Perspective rules. They indicate the duties and obligations. Prospective rules. They indicate what should not be done. Sign and symbol system. They are all the arbitrary and conventionalized communicative resources that the social group uses to transmit messages. We can mention language, writing, graphic signs, and symbols. Non-normative forms of behavior. They are those traits of behavior that differentiate one social group from another, even within a shared culture. It is what is called idiosyncrasy. Now we have to explain what education is. It is one of the most important elements that adapt the behaviors of a society in general, makes us all behave with peace and harmony before each individual, makes us full of knowledge in order to prepare for our future and be respectable and educated citizens. Education can also be determined from school. It is something that all citizens need, and it is fundamental to a harmonious society. Formal education, on the other hand, consists of the systematic presentation of ideas, facts, and techniques to students. One person exerts an orderly and voluntary influence on another, with the intention of training him. Thus, the school system is the way in which a society transmits and preserves its collective existence among the new generations. On the other hand, it should be noted that the modern society attaches particular importance to the concept of lifelong or continuing education, which establishes that the educational process is not limited to children and youth, but the human being must acquire knowledge throughout his life. Within the field of education, another key aspect is evaluation, which presents the results of the teaching and learning process. The evaluation contributes to improving education and, in a way, never ends, since each activity carried out by an individual is subjected to analysis to determine if he achieved what he sought. Now that we have the necessary knowledge about these two important concepts, we have to solve the unknown that was raised from the beginning. It is important to incorporate the culture into education. Why? For in reality, if it's too important, since if we discard the idea of including it, we will basically eradicate the knowledge of the identity of the student or person. That person would not know about his historical past, and it is important to consider that we must not only inform ourselves about our personal cultures, but we must also inform ourselves about the culture external to us, since there are complete nations which are controlled by cultures. The relations between culture and education cannot be analyzed without taking into account the current context of marked social and economic transformation that, in many cases, translate into profound inequalities. The presence of culture in the educational field can be analyzed from the hitherto traditional lines of public intervention. On the one hand, informalized teaching structures, both in terms of school and curricula and artistic education, and on the other hand, in educational services of cultural facilities and institutions such as museums, theaters, etc. The importance that culture acquires in non-formal education should be mentioned and not left out despite not being strictly dependent on public funding, such as in the offer of extracurricular activities and in educational and leisure programs promoted by leisure entities. All these ways of training and dynamization undoubtedly contribute to the formation of ethical, civic values, and obviously cultural. In conclusion, I think it is too important to take into account to implement in school education about cultures, since it is a certain path of which we have to have complete knowledge. It is important not to leave this type of learning on the one hand. The conclusion that I will give in general is very well represented by Juan Ramos de la Fuente. Education and culture are the most powerful lever to promote development with justice in our country. I rescue the idea of education as an integral process, as conceived by the Master of America, Don Justo Sierra, of unavoidable presence on this day. Every problem, whether social or political, taking these words in their highest meanings, necessarily implies a pedagogical problem, an educational problem, because being strong is, for individuals, summarizing their interior physical, intellectual, ethical, and aesthetic development in determination of their character.
Does culture have an impact on education? When we hear the word education, we think about acquiring knowledge, but it is more than that. It is a very valuable tool to help us to be self-reliant and develop great confidence to perform in difficult tasks. It is a lifelong process, and it greatly helps the growth in human civilization. Education is an essential because it allows us to have a broader perspective of our environment. The more knowledge you have, the more opportunities will open to allow you to achieve better possibilities in professional and personal growth. It develops many skills that will be useful to fight against injustice, violence, corruption, and other terrible phenomena that are present in our society nowadays. One of the most important benefits that we can gain from education is that prepares us students to deal with cultural ethics and norms. The values we have are thanks to the ethics that we develop through life. We define what is good and what is bad based on our culture, beliefs, etc. Culture and education are closely related to each other. But first, we need to understand what is the meaning of culture. According to Max Bates on 2018, culture can be defined as an social heritage of an organization, community, or society, which is a pattern of responses that have been discovered and invented when the has interacted, which is a combination of beliefs, customs, religions, and arts, while education is the process of impact knowledge or acquiring knowledge. Also, Federico Lencitti on 2014 mentions that culture shapes individuals worldwide and the way communities address the changes of their societies. For this reason, education serves as a critical vehicle for transmitting these value systems as well as for learning for humanity's diversity of worldwide and for inspiring future creativity and innovation. The meaning of culture has several interpretations. Culture gives the sense of national pride and develops an individual identity as a nation. Culture has a lot of influence on our identity. It defines who we see ourselves and how we relate to others. It provides just a sense of belonging with a certain group. Sense of belonging is essential for self-statement, establishing effective bonds, and having a healthy emotional development. Strangely, any student's sense of belonging in an education institute is intended to prepare them for success. Educational institutes were created to give people the skills that and knowledge they will need in the world. These undoubtedly encompass understanding and oneself already and the environment that inclusion of local culture and heritage is essential in any educational institute. Our cultural heritage has a fundamental influence in our identity. According to UNESCO in 2005, cultural heritage is, in its broadest sense, both a product and a process, which provides societies with a health of resources that are inherited from the past, created in the present, and bestowed for the benefit of future generations. It is something that is practiced since birth. Cultural traditions are part of who we are and our identity. Another part of our identity is shaped by our religion. Religion has always been present in humanity because it makes humans feel part of a cultural group that shares their beliefs, rights, and customs. They also have a common way of seeing the world as in its phenomena, culture, beliefs, values, etc. Have the power of unify people around the common purpose. There are many unique cultures around the world. They make an important contribution to cultural diversity. In education, cultural diversity prepares students to be global citizens and allows them to have a broader perspective and opinions of stuff that happens around the world. Having different and divergent perspectives creates various learning outcomes. They explore different that enrich the learning experience. The interaction between these cultures is very significant because it brings new ideas and the ability of learning from each other. Groups activities and involve diverse group members helps to create a positive atmosphere and collaborative learning. Having diverse students together in a classroom helps them to develop critical thinking and problem solving. Experiencing with cultural diversity in school promotes creativity. The more ideas and experiences people are exposed to, the more creative they can be. By integrating traditions, customs, and values in education, a lot of benefits can be obtained. One of the most remarkable benefits is that it helps to preserve our cultural heritage for cultural generations and encourage to integrate culture into everyday life through redevelopment, lifelong learning, and community conversations. Preserving the cultural memory will lead to a greater understanding of the nation destiny and the global society and community of nations. Cultural heritage helps the students to in touch with their environment, understand and perceive better the world, and related to culture in each of its manifestations. It is a tool to allow the students to express creatively emotions and ideas. In school, students develop competencies and cultural skills that are required to interacting with people around the world. Another very important factor to mention is that education works as a great diffuser for culture because it spreads the beliefs in social activities of a culture to different ethnic groups, religions, and nationalities through the cultural events that take place in the academic formation of the students. The cultural events that the school organizes to honor and the festives contribute immensely to inform community members of their traditions, values, beliefs, and culture. In conclusion, culture reminds us that we are part of a history that defines our past and shapes who we are today and who we are likely to become. It has a lot of influence on our beliefs, attitudes, values regarding what is right and what is wrong, and behaviors. From these cultural influences, our identities are formed. Identifying with a particular culture gives people feelings and belonging. The relation between education and culture is essential for society. Cultural events organized by academic institutions help the student to interact with their traditions and customs. In addition, they favor social cohesion and cultural diversity. Integrating cultural events and academic formation of students is very important because it helps them to keep in connection with their other roots and culture and origin.